Today we're going to be talking about the role of AI in leadership development. And I know when we're starting out, we want people to sort of introduce themselves in the chat. And I know there's like a very specific sort of like Maori way that we do this. And before I butcher any of this pronunciation of how this works, I might throw it over to Carl just to have us like talk about how we're going to introduce ourselves.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, it's called a pipiha, and it's a really simple way of connecting with each other, which is rather than saying your name and role, you talk about where you're from. So for myself, kia ora tātou, which is a way of saying greetings to all, hello to everyone, and I connect with my mountain, which is Kopaku Te Mauanga, which is the mountain from the place that I'm from. The river is Ko Tairoa Te Ara, which is the river that flows through the area I'm from. And then I am from Aotearoa, which is New Zealand. And so it's just a great way for you to each, and then my family is Sanders Edwards, so that's where I'm from. So it's kind of a hierarchy which puts us at the bottom of that pyramid. We're in service of these places we're from. I'm from these places they have helped make me, which then puts a mindset of guardianship around me rather than of ownership. So this place has made me, and therefore I've got to give back to it. So it's just a nice way of introducing yourself. So if you introduce yourself, where you are from, if there is a river or a body of water where you are from that you associate with, great. If there's a river, if there is a mountain, sorry, great. And then just the place in the world that you are. And it's just a nice way for us all to connect. So just in the chat, just tell us a little bit about the place you are from and then your name. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you.
Well, and we're also going to do that in our Mentimeter poll, right? So we want everyone to scan the QR code and share that here. And in the meantime, Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself, and then I will too, and then we'll dive in?
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Ryan Higley. The body of water that I relate myself to is actually the Arkansas River. You would think I'm from Colorado, live in Colorado Springs, and lots of my family here in Colorado. You would think that I would associate with the Colorado River, but that's actually on the other side of the Rocky Mountains from where we live. And so I grew up right next to and playing in the Arkansas River.
Awesome. And I'm your other co-host. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Global Chats for Techies. My name's Renee. I grew up in Kansas, so there are no mountains there, and there are very few rivers. There's a lot of cows and wheat, though. But I now live in Pescadero, California, and actually have a river on my property. Well, it's not really a river; it's Pescadero Creek, but the salmon run up it, which is pretty cool. And we hop over there and camp sometimes on our river. And then I am very closely associated to the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is what I have to drive over if I want to visit anybody in the real world. Is that it? Oh, and my last name's Arridge, so it's British. Go Liverpool. So, that's awesome. And then Carl, you already introduced yourself. So Roland, it looks like he's sharing our Mentimeter. That's awesome. We have people dialing in from what looks like to be many places. Germany, New Zealand, California. We know Colorado Springs is in the house.
Boston, I see Boston in the chat. And Switzerland.
Wow.
Oh, we've got Oregon, lots of rivers and mountains there.
Love those mountains and rivers.
Sorry, I was just gonna come off mute. I think maybe some more people wanted to if you guys need more instructions. So like if you just type in menti.com and then put this code on your phone, or scan this QR code so you can join the polls here. So we do have some questions throughout the chat.
Oh yeah, doing the polls makes it all the more fun.
And we'll send a copy of the results as well to everybody. So
thank you.
Thanks, Roland. All right, well, towards the end of our time, we'll actually, well, Well, actually, let me start up. Well, Ryan, did you already share the purpose?
No, so as everyone's going in here and doing this, great, love seeing that in the chat and in the Menti polls. So for those who don't know, Global Chats, this is I believe our 5th or 6th one. And you know, we're here to engage in like interesting and inspiring conversation, really to get our wheels turning about, you know, cool and emerging subjects in leadership development. And I cannot think of something that is more cool or emerging than the role of AI in leadership development. And, you know, this will be an opportunity to hear from myself, hear from Renee, and, you know, learn from Carl about all this. But it's also about, we want to hear what everyone in the chat, what everyone on the call is how you're implementing it, what you're interested in about it. So please feel free to add things to the chat. We will obviously come back to those in a Q&A session towards the end. And if you've been to a Global Chat before, you know that we are not the typical hosts. Typically, we have our amazing colleagues, Corey Criswell and Mark Watkins. But Renee and I are like so passionate about this topic. We talk about it all the time that I feel like we just had to elbow our way in for this one. So thank you for having us. And maybe, yeah, I'll throw it back to Renee to sort of talk about the next part.
Yeah, awesome. And we are both Adeptioneers. I totally just made that up right now, but it seems like a good title. Ryan is actually our creative director, and I'm a solution architect. And so we spend a lot of time riffing on what is the next cool thing we should be trying as we design amazing solutions for our clients. And I mean, he is a man who needs no introduction, I'm sure. But Carl, who we will be interviewing today, who you will get to hear from today, is the CEO at Adeption, and also, I have to just say, an incredible leader. And he has been playing with AI before AI even knew AI existed. So I'm really excited to learn from him today. So we have a pretty engaging process that we use, or we think is an engaging process that we use for Global Chats. But we do like to take time at the end for all of the rousing and riveting questions that I'm sure will come up as we have our conversation today. So I would just encourage anybody that has a question that pop into your mind to actually throw it into the chat, and we'll select a few at the end, or maybe even open it up for Q&A at the end. We have time set aside. Carl, was there any other intros that you wanted to offer about yourself before we dive into our rapid fire?
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Renee.
Okay, so let's kick it off with a couple of questions to get to know Carl real fast. You ready, Carl?
I'm ready.
Okay, what do you love best about your work?
It combines people and it combines technology, both things that I'm really passionate about, and it helps me make a difference. And so I did that circle exercise where it's like, what are you passionate about? What are you really good at? And what can you make a living out of? And I got this job. So I was pretty happy, given I've been doing it for the last 12 years.
Awesome. And if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Right now, I can hear the surf booming on the beach, which is my ocean. So I would absolutely be out there and amongst it. So, you know.
Feel you. Something not in your resume?
I absolutely love weekend cook-ups. So I've got a big old smoker, and smoked fish, smoked meat, the longer and slower, the better. And more guests and people around to enjoy it with.
Love that. Me too. A nickname you were known by, and where did it come from?
It would be very hard to believe, I'm being super vulnerable this, but my stepfather called me Button because I had a small button nose, which is somehow very, very much a part of my distant past now. So.
What is your newest go-to app on your phone?
This is a good question, because I'm kind of like, despite the topic and being into technology, it's probably the IPL cricket app, which is the Indian Premier League. I'm quite a passionate cricket follower, and one of my kids is right into it. So that's the one that I go to the most in the last little while. The tournament's just finished, and the other one is I'm just loving the Google Photos memories. And it brings up the little scrolls of the kids and the various things. And it's just like, wow, life's just evolving right in front of my eyes. It's nice.
Narrow AI at work right there.
There you go. That's right.
Yep. What are you reading or listening to right now?
I couldn't recommend it enough. It's a book by Anne Murphy Paul called The Extended Mind. And it kind of gets us out of a brain-bound metaphor for our intelligence. I think it's relevant to the topic. And she uses a wonderful metaphor of like our brains are more like, we construct our mind more like a magpie constructs a nest. So it makes it out of all of the things around it. So the environment that we live within has a massive impact on our intelligence or our ability to think through things. And each mind is like a nest that's made from the things that are around it. And so the things around us really, really make a difference to how we function, which I love.
Wow, that's a cool way to think of your mind as a nest. A little disconcerting, Carl. I don't know.
Lots of things are.
You can shove a lot of weird stuff in the net.
There's some strange bits. Strange.
Right. Final question. What motivates you to get out of bed in the morning?
It's a good, I think I mentioned it with the sound of the surf. Most mornings I feel like I'm pulled out. It's kind of not like a motivation. There's things to do. I'm pretty high energy and just kind of like, it's just, I'd love to be a little bit lazier, to be honest, but it's just, yeah, getting dragged out of bed by the things to do.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for that. I feel like we all know you a lot better now, Button. Okay. So you've spent the last 10 years leveraging AI to impact leaders around the globe. What about this topic has captured your attention?
It got my attention a long time ago. I did a engineering degree, and part of that was a computer science paper. And I remember learning about the first neural net algorithms that had been in development at that stage for quite some time. I think this was in the late 1990s. And I got really fascinated because at one point there was an algorithm that had been developed to look at photos and detect whether it was a male or a female. And it trained, and I learned how the neural net worked and just found that whole thing fascinating. And it was getting really, really good results. And I think for 180 people, it got them correct. And then it got a false result. And it said that a female was a male. And I think it took 3 or 4 months for the researchers that had built the algorithm to work out what was going on, because these are closed boxes. And what it had learned, because it's a machine learning, is that males wore shirts with collars and females didn't. It was just entirely to do with the data that had been fed to it, i.e. the training that had been given in the photos. And so, of course, person 187 was a female that wore a collar, and so said male. So it got me really interested. It got me interested in both the possibilities and the limitations of these technologies. Obviously, we've come a vast, long way from there, but it's something that I kind of like to remember about it and about the way the technology works. It can do amazing things, and there are also limitations that sometimes we're just completely blind to because we don't know what's behind the black box. So as far as leadership development goes, it was 2014 we first connected into an algorithm called Google Predict, which is an AI that Google were providing. And it was, I think, 1/10 of a cent per run, so it was very cheap. And you could train it. So we could ask a set of 4 coaching questions to 100 people, and then based on the responses that those 100 people gave, we would say, here is a piece of content or a book that I would recommend to a person who answers like that. And so I had 10 different coaches look at the 100 different responses and recommend 5 different pieces of advice or content that might help that person with the way they were answering. And so we fed it into Google Predict. You could feed the questions, and for each answer string, you could feed the output. And Google Predict was just like the collar algorithm. It said, well, if anything looks like this, I'm going to give them that. And because we trained it with 10 different people, we got out of bias, and the results were really quite great. I mean, I remember with a large organization that was using our platform, and everyone in the group where we were debriefing were going, it's amazing. I don't know how it knew it, because what we could create is 100 people could answer the same questions, and then they could get recommended 100 different combinations of micro-learning content based on their content, their own context. So come a long way. We've since developed our own algorithm since then, but the promise of it got me really, really excited. You know, the idea that we could create linear experiences where we could take people through the same set of things, but give them a very non-linear experience based on their personal needs and their personal thinking. And it wasn't something that needed to be explicitly programmed. Like, we didn't need to say, if somebody says this, give them that. Because in such a complex world like coaching and people, we're always going to have a fail there. The last part is Google Predict was not good at learning. So that's the next element coming through.
Well, you said a bunch of interesting things there, but I actually want to pick up on one word you said, which is possibilities. And this is a great time. I want to invite everybody that's on this call to share in the chat, what are you curious about with this topic? We're going to dive in pretty deep on leadership development today and tech and AI. But what else is on your mind inside that or beyond that in terms of artificial intelligence? We'll give you like a few moments to just share that in the chat. See what we're getting, and then we're going to move to a Mentimeter poll. This is a great question. I provide leadership dev for my org. How should I be using AI? That's exactly what we're going to talk about next. How far in the future will AI take over leadership on all areas? Amen. I think that's the burning question we all have, right? Yeah, and what about AI as a personal social connection point? How legit is that? We don't know yet, do we? Cool. Well, as more thoughts come up, we'd love to hear, how are you thinking about AI? What challenges are you interested in pursuing with it? And let's move to the Mentimeter poll. So we've shared up a quick question. If you've already QR coded in, you should be able to hit the next button and answer this question. Have you used ChatGPT or other AI tools before? Looks like we've got a pretty large number of yeses, but even some no's. Pretty early, right, in the world of ChatGPT, and especially when it comes to leadership development. I think we're on the cutting edge of this whole thing when it comes to how do we use artificial intelligence when it comes to the problems of people and growth. And then the next question, thank you so much, Roland. What are your experiences with AI in leadership development? And we had a variety of options. What are we seeing? So a lot of people are using technology. Oh yes, the MOOC, right? We gotta love the massive open online course, but not for AI, for leadership development. Ryan, anything you want to add?
Yeah. The very last one. Do not want to use AI for leadership development because we're worried about it. Low scores there, which I love. That people are interested and really want to see how that can be built in. Which I am also curious and excited about where we are in it.
This is really great. What's interesting to me is that other than that one, the other three or the other four are relatively close together. Exploring it, leveraging it, 2.8, that's great. I want to hear about that. And then obviously a lot of people are leaning into tech. All right. So shall we move to some more questions, Ryan?
Yeah.
You want to take the first one?
Yeah, absolutely. So Carl, like the very first ideas or inklings of AI, they date way back, like to, like the mid 50s even. And I know you talked a little bit about like how you were experimenting with it or learning about it, previously. So how do you feel like it's changed and developed, especially in leadership development over the years?
I think what's happened is it's actually been a technology that's been in use for a very long time. I mean, things that have kind of exploded into the public sphere recently have been in development and use for the last 10 years, largely driving advertising sort of engines. And so we've been subject to them in many ways. So the thing that's changed the most recently is it's become now very public, and our collective awareness has gone up, which I think is a good thing. I really do, because I think it's we were being very, very impacted by machine learning, AI algorithms anyway. So now we're it's in our face rather than it being in the background. So that's a big change. And then there's been quite it's both a hardware and a software evolution, but the generative technologies that we're seeing now, which kind of more and more take humans out of the loop, so that the algorithms can learn really quite rapidly and synthesize very, very large data sets and do things that appear a lot smarter without as much human supervision. So I think, I mentioned 2014, it was torturous to train Google Predict. And now, the power of, you can do similar things really with GPT like that, the snap of the finger. So I think the underlying capability hasn't changed so much, but the pace that you can sort of get results has accelerated just out of sight, which of course makes it more useful. And I can see some things here, and I'll be perfectly honest, more worrying as well, because you can do things that don't help as much more easily.
Speaking of that worrying, just one quick follow-up, like the worrying part of it, there is, we've seen that it will come up with completely plausible, but completely untrue answers, right? They call it like AI, like sort of hallucinating, which, it can come up with a great quote or a great, link for you or a resource, and then it just made up all of that. Is that something? I don't know. I didn't see that coming necessarily, and I wonder what you think about that for like the future of using these technologies.
Yeah, it's almost a feature as much, and this is where we could go really deep, but it's as much a feature as it is a problem, because in order to, humans say crazy things and do crazy things, and that's one of the ways that we learn. We stumble through life and gradually build knowledge and wisdom through it. But we have also learned, both individually and collectively, that the things that we read have been, thought about and fact checked and tested, and we're very trusting. We believe we like confident people. There's been some research done that the people you should least trust are those that hold opinions most firmly and most confidently, because they're the ones that actually aren't as accurate when it comes to being experts. And if you think of the way that some AI talks back to you, it's like, well, this has got to be true. It's got to be true because it's just so certain. It's not saying, maybe it could be this or it could be that, which is kind of a very, very human interaction. It's just saying, this is what it is. And so, I worry about that, because I worry about the dumbing down of people or the stratification, because I love the comment somebody said here about how do we stay at the head of the plow, because I think that is one of the key things that this class of technology can enable for us. But if we're lazy, it won't, and we'll have a very few people at the head of the plow and a very vast set of people that are subject to, and that'll create some stratification. It's a simple decision, really, though. I mean, and a decision that people like who are in this chat now can help make, because the exact same technology could be the very thing that keeps the vast set of people more conscious and at the head of the plow. It's just how we optimize the algorithms.
I love that. And
Yeah,
we're going to talk more about AI, but I want to just take a step maybe sideways for a second, because you've been immersed in AI for a while, but you've also been immersed in the technology of HR development, or of leadership development and HR processes for a long time too. And technology has actually advanced quite significantly in our field over the last 10 years as well. So my question is what are some of the most exciting tech developments you've seen recently? And before you answer, Ryan and I thought it would be fun to ask ChatGPT that question. And of course, ChatGPT wanted to focus on AI integration, but we gave it a few other prompts, as any of you know, working in ChatGPT sometimes needs a little nudge to the left or to the right. And what he said, what they said was the increased use of VR and AR, so virtual reality, augmented reality, in leadership development training has been significant. And these tech provide immersive experiential learning environments where leaders can practice and enhance their skills in realistically simulated scenarios. So ironically, Carl and I did a lot of work in this area when I was working at eBay. And so maybe, Carl, why don't you let the people know what you know beyond AR and VR in terms of tech?
I think there's a few classes, but the one that the whole area I'm most excited about with technology, full stop, is that it feels like we're finally moving past a content dissemination role of technology. So for a long time, it felt like all the vendors, all the capital, all the innovation was going into solving the problem of how do we get content to people more efficiently and effectively and tell them what we want them to know. In organizations. The problem I've got with that is that's a problem that's already been solved. It's been solved beautifully by the search engines, and people use them all of the time. And so the constraint that we face hasn't been content. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, and you've just given, ChatGPT gave us one example, actually experiential learning. I'd argue we don't really need to practice that much off the job because it's happening every single day on the job. So we can just actually be more mindful with we don't need to go into a VR simulation. We just need to actually think about the next conversation we're having, and that's happening 1,000 times every week. So, but taking that aside, there is a general shift, whether it's through the coaching platforms, even some of the kind of the program management type software that's out there that is focusing now more on getting people to have experiences and reflect about them in a mindful way and actually accelerate the learning process that goes on in here naturally in the flow of work, which is a trendy thing to say, but I think it's a really significant shift, and seeing a lot more technologies focus on that side of the ledger rather than just like pushing stuff to people that we think they want to know, which has got a half-life of a day or two. And, you know, we're going to miss 90% of the time with what we push to them versus what they actually need.
Yeah, I love that answer, Carl. And, you know, the reason why I joined the Adeption team 4 months ago was because the B3, I call it the Adeption way, but the B3 way of helping people learn and grow really enables facilitators to take an enormous step back, right? So anything we're doing is more like, how do you become, and this is happening in education too, but how do you become a coach and a mentor and not the sage on the stage, you know, but how do you do that inside companies and corporate environments that we're so familiar with, where we've been doing it this way for so long? And that's what I get excited about around the technology, is how it really enables us to look at blended learning beyond just the modality or delivery, but also the approach and the experiential methods of learning. Ryan, you want to take the next question?
Yeah, well, you know, we've had some of this question has been coming up in the chat, and this is a fear that I feel like we see a lot, right? You couldn't possibly be following the AI in technology and in our world today without seeing headlines about AI replacing jobs. You know, so one of the questions we have, Carl, is that do you think that's a concern for leadership and development practitioners? And if it isn't, what should they be worrying about? And I think Roland, as Carl's asking this, we have a Mentimeter poll to put up as well.
So the replacing jobs is a really interesting one. I sort of feel like I wrote a paper quite a while ago, and it was called Back to the Future. And I actually think the types of jobs that a lot of us have been doing for the past 200 years are terrible jobs for humans. So we had the Industrial Revolution, and we started making factories, and we started doing very simple, repetitive tasks with, you know, whether it was with our minds or our bodies, as economies globally industrialized. And if you look back through the span of humanity, we're far more used to doing very, very different types of work, solving complex problems, moving all of the time, acting and living in dynamic environments, kind of quite close to nature. And we went into these very sort of sterile box type environments. And so what's happening, or I think this is a large part of the hope that's happening with both automation and AI, is a lot of that work that is kind of like, you know, it was good for humans for a while, can get done by machines. And it's not really the best use of our own grey matter or our physical selves as well. And so there is, and you know, we've seen it already. There is really no evidence of across the entire globe of job displacement anyway, because it's freeing us up to do different types of work. That's where my concern is. I want to make sure that people actually stay freed up to do that type of work. So that's the general thing. I think we're entering an era where humans can be more human and actually bring our very unique contributions forward, and a lot more of us. In leadership development itself, I just like, because of that, the simple work is going away, the more complex work is remaining. We did some, one of our clients did some research in their organization, and they were looking at the types of work defined by job descriptions that their C-suite were doing versus their frontline staff. And there was like an 80% overlap. And yet they looked at it and they were spending 6 figures a year on leadership development and support to deal with the complex, ambiguous situations that their C-suite were dealing with. And they were spending like 2 figures for development on their frontline staff. And yet they were literally dealing with the same challenges. And so what we're seeing is, you know, there is no work that doesn't require a high level of leadership and a high level of complex adaptive skills and a high level of being able to pause and reflect and do all the things that coaches and leadership development professionals tell us to do, have a high sense of own identity and being able to create some distance from the interactions that we have. And so when you look at it like that, I think this is the broad environment of automation and AI is creating the biggest boom or biggest potential ever for the world of leadership development. I don't think there is a role in the next 20 or 30 years that wouldn't benefit from having somebody help coach and support them so that they can learn and evolve and become the human that they can be more quickly and less pain and more painlessly. And so from that point of view, there is no way there are enough coaches or leadership development facilitators in the world. And there shouldn't be either, because if we have a one-to-one situation, we actually need people doing stuff as well, not being coached. So from that point of view, I think there's a huge opportunity really for the field to be able to scale what we do and not depersonalize it, as I saw one of the points that were made there. And I think we're seeing it already. And if we don't, then we end up in that stratification risk that I mentioned earlier, where you've got a whole lot of people that are just kind of unconsciously subject to these technologies, and a very few elite who do extremely well out of it. And we just know from our recent history of the last few hundred years that that doesn't end well.
That's true. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I loved you brought in sort of like why that, some of the worries in the chat, right? Or like that depersonalization, the dehumanization of that. But I think if you think about it in the sense of like working together or using that technology as a tool, then you keep that humanization, you keep that personalization. It's just like it helps you be more human, be more personal in the moments that you have. Great. Renee, next question.
Yeah. All right, so we've lived in the world of fear. Now let's talk about the cool possibilities. And Carl kind of already started to go that way. So if you have any others to add, Carl, while you are, we'd love to hear from the audience. What are some of the exciting visions that you are thinking about when you think about the possibilities of AI?
So there's a few. Like the one that I was just hinted at is the combination. So one metaphor that we've sort of been talking about internally and experimenting with, and the data is really showing it up, is that it's the power of and. So there's a couple of metaphors to think about. One is London's got an incredible subway. The Tube is an amazing mass transit, and anyone can get nearly anywhere within the city on preset rails very, very efficiently, moving large numbers of people at very, very low costs. And then you pop out and you're nearly at your destination, and there's just maybe a mile or a kilometre or two that you need to go. And that's when you can call up your Uber, and that single person comes and picks you up and drives you to where you need to go. That is, and from an environmental impact point of view, from a cost point of view, from all sorts of ways, that's a lot more efficient than you getting an Uber all the way and having one person drive you all the way. So coaching is kind of like being an Uber. You're taking one person on a journey, and the unit of value is delivered, whether it's enhanced by a technology platform or not. That unit of value is delivered by you talking to that person. Well, I think that, and you talk to any coach too, and we have, a lot of the time they ask people the same questions. A lot of the time, good coaches build patterns, just like we all do. That's how we get good at crafts. We have repetitive things that we go through. And so the thing that we're thinking about is, could we use the technology and some AI to be like the mass transit system, get people 80, 90% of the way where they need to go, and then use humans to deal with the exceptions and the last little piece. So it's a blended system. What you do then, almost without any dehumanization, is you increase your scale of who you can reach, whether it's cohort-based experiences or one-on-one coaching, by a factor of 10 times, without losing the actual person when you really need the person. And it's almost like a coaching triage. And I'm really excited about that. We're already seeing in our platform about 10 to 20% of people reach out to a coach when they're given the option. The others are fine. They go ahead and they do their work. They've had the chance to reflect and step back, and they've had some inputs, and they go and experiment and do their work on the job. And then their coach can come in, and their peers and their social system as well, and give them some feedback on how they went. And that helps keep the personalization high. So it's a social system that's developed around them as well. And I think the technology can really enhance that, especially, and I noticed the bias there, exactly the same algorithms that create echo chambers and sort of just reinforce our own interest areas. Like I get shudders every time I get asked by something about, what are you interested in? Because that's the only thing I see, and I'm like, I don't know yet. I'm learning all the time. Show me some different things. But that's just a tuning. That's just and it's really driven by the financial model behind those technologies. It's not the technology itself. So we could also, I'm really excited by the ability of AI technologies to expose us to different ideas, introduce us to different people who have solved similar challenges to what we've solved, for example, because once we've got these data sets in a really, really useful way, or somebody that's, on whatever sort of developmental profile, scale, competency model, adult developmental framework you want to use, somebody who's operating from a stage a bit different from you, and they see the world in a way that's different from you. And here's how they solve the challenge that you've got. So it's a way of actually connecting people and being more human and creating more interesting, diverse perspectives than what you ever could just speaking to one person or being in a small cohort. And it doesn't have to come at the expense of those other things. So I'm super, super excited about that. I'll be greedy and say one more thing too. And this is one that's a little bit back to where ChatGPT was going. And I've got a couple of friends in this space, and we talk about it a lot. And I don't know how it's going to play out, but was it 7 years ago we ran a Gameference? And if anyone's interested in the concept of a Gameference, it is just totally awesome. So you throw away all of the boring things about a conference, and you just do all of the things that people really enjoy. And you still have speakers, but you have cohort groups, and you compete with each other to solve the topic of the conference. And so we ran one on the future of leadership development. And at that point, the winning team, and I think there might be somebody here who was from the winning team, came up with augmented self-awareness. So one of the hearts of developing yourself is to become more aware of yourself. And once you become more aware of yourself, you develop more control, you develop more perspective, and you're less caught by situations. And so having technology being able to give you real life feedback in a situation. So one of my friends has got a business that works in call centers at the moment, and they coach call center operators in real time with feedback about the quality of the emotional connection that is happening in the real time on the line that they're in. And I think technologies like that, you've got a Zoom call, and a leader or a person, anyone in the call, they can all be taking leadership, is getting feedback about just how engaged the group is. Like, how would you change the way that you talk and act if you're getting told in real time that you've been speaking 80% of the time, which is probably what I've been doing, so I should stop. But I think there's quite, and not only 80% of the time, but you're using language that is coming from a redefining mindset, and everyone else in the meeting is talking from a expert mindset. So you're having a miss, and it can tell you that right in real time, and you might be able to adjust, connect more, and be more human with those people.
That's awesome, Carl. And I think I was thinking, I was forming an insight as I was listening to you, that really almost all of the tech and leadership development is all about shortening the feedback cycle, right? Because we know that's how you learn is you shoot the paper ball into the basket, you miss, you adjust. So how do we shorten the feedback cycle? Because we're not getting the feedback we need, right, to grow. And can you just speak for a second? I know we're edging into Q&A, but can you just share for a moment this idea of colliding perspectives and how the Adeption experience or the Adeption platform helps elevate that feedback and give relevant guidance to people?
Yes, yeah, no, good. I mean, the thing is that we grow and develop when we have to, most easily, not when we want to. And so as learning development professionals, we often come and say, oh, I need to have this person grow. It's very, very, very difficult. The way that we grow, and when we ask people when they've grown the most, it's when they hit a ceiling and when they hit a situation that their current worldview, the current way that they process and see the world is insufficient to deal with the situation that they're in. So they sort of do this. And first of all, you've got to be aware that you're just doing this and you're trying the same thing and getting no result. And often we're trapped in that, and that we feel overwhelmed. And with a little bit of space and stepping back, we can recognize it and go, oh, okay, I'm not, the ways that I see the world, the ways that I've been dealing with this is not serving me now. And that's a big realization. And then to break through it, as you said, Renee, you literally need colliding perspectives. You need access to different ways of seeing the world, to open new neural pathways, to give you new options. And it's one of the wonderful things that coaching and leadership development can do, and often somewhat accidentally. So it's like, how would somebody else deal with this problem? Or how has somebody else who's operating and seeing the world from a different paradigm deal with this particular situation? Because we're all stuck in our own paradigms and biases. And so that's what we call colliding perspectives. We don't know which perspective's going to be right, because remember, the mind's like a nest, and we're just pulling pieces together and constructing a new nest. And it's all of a sudden, oh, that's now given me a way of seeing the world that can have me go around this. And so colliding perspectives really give us access to growth opportunities, which we can then experiment with. Maybe it works, it doesn't work, but we learn regardless. So that colliding perspectives is just so important. I think it's one of the most powerful things technology can do. I hate to say it, but I think most of the technologies that we expose ourselves do exactly the opposite and are very anti-developmental. But that's not a fault of the algorithm or the technology. That's just the way that we're choosing to use it and consume it.
So true. I feel like so I know, like, we wanted to do some Q&A, and I feel like this last question that I had from you got brought up in the chat multiple times, and it's really just around, let's say you're in L&D and you're looking to benefit from those AI advancements right now. Like, what would be a suggestion on where to start?
I did prep for this one. Create a point of view. We've done a few iterations of this now, and we're redoing it, but build yourself a little mini manifesto. It's like, be in charge. I love that comment about staying the head of the plow. Be intentional and really conscious, because I think the most important thing, if we as humans stay conscious, we'll stay ahead and benefit enormously. If we sit back and just let it all wash over us and be subject to it, then that's when the bad things happen. And so, absolutely experiment and really look at how we can do this, because there is a vast opportunity for us collectively, but be in charge. So, if you're in a large organization, create a manifesto. We've had clients that have had a point of view that stopped us working with them. Great, as far as I'm concerned. I celebrate every time somebody's actually taking a pause and thinking, how do we want to consciously leverage these technologies? What risks and experiments are we prepared to take, and what are we not prepared to take? So that's the first thing. And then be prepared to adjust it, revisit it as you learn as well, because inertia is a very big problem. You may learn that your manifesto or your point of view was too ambitious and too aggressive, and you see some bad things, or it wasn't aggressive enough. So have a review process in it. It's not a very sexy answer, Ryan, but I actually think it's I really do think it's the most important thing, because as Renee said, we've got the ability to learn. We're still the most efficient learning and adapting organisms and machines that are out there. We're not machines, but on this planet, it's something that's made humans what we are, and we can solve the problems that we've created as well. And we can really adapt and learn, but we only do when we're conscious, when we're woken up and that we're actually awake. And so I'd be really deliberate about that, and then experiment. Let the tech do some heavy lifting and leave us for the really fun stuff.
Yeah, well, I love that. And the technology is moving so fast that if you have a point of view and then you go heads down on it for even a few months, it's passing you by, and you're going to have to be flexible, but intentional. I like that.
Awesome. Well, we have made it to Q&A. This is your chance to ask Carl your burning question. Roland, could you perhaps guide me on the best way for folks to do Q&A? Do they have access to just go off mute and ask their question, or do they need to ask?
Yeah, I think we have time for some people to go off mute or just drop it off chat.
Yeah, so if you have a burning question, simply unmute and throw it out there. Maybe introduce yourself.
Hi there. I was curious about the augmented self-awareness and the feedback, and I guess I put something in the chat about, particularly here in New Zealand, we do have a very interesting relationship with feedback, and does link very much to psychological safety. So I'm just kind of interested in terms of how you think that might play out, because that's a mindset shift that needs to happen to even be able to be open to feedback. I think there's a safety perhaps in getting it through an augmented kind of version, because it doesn't feel so personalized. But I think, I agree with your sentiment, Carl, about the opportunity to have feedback every day. So if we have that opportunity, why are we not taking it? Thanks.
Yeah, I actually, that's the one where I'm most curious to see how it plays out, because you get it seems to be quite a diametric response from people when talking about that. Like, some people just think that it sounds absolutely horrific, and it could, cognitively overload you too in the moment. Even just the example that I gave about getting that, so you sort of freeze up and become less effective because it's feedback that we're not dealing with. And then other people just light up and go, oh, I'd love to know. And so I think it's one of those things that there'll be specific use cases, Cheryl, where it starts taking. And so, my friend's business, call centers, for example, people in those environments, we know that the people that emotionally connect with, have good bedside manners, just the same as doctors, get the best results. But they've got so much data in front of them, they're processing a lot of information, because they're often quite technical situations they're dealing with, that they're not picking up the emotional nuances and those sort of subtle cues. And so the feedback really helps them. It's kind of like saying, stop entering data in the screen, start connecting with the person you're talking to. And anyone who's, been in a call, that would be a really useful thing for us all, that's the feedback that's given. So it's a very, very specific use case. And I really think it's going to be I think by the time it gets into a more generalized kind of leadership development sphere, we'll either have, as a society, accepted it or not.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that question. It's a great one.
Yeah.
It also tied into a couple of questions that we're hitting in the chat. So we only have 10 minutes left, so we want to move to the action reflection. Ryan, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so we've talked about a lot of different things during this, kind of like the early stages and where AI is going, and in leadership development. And we want you to just think like, what is that provoking? What thinking is that provoking in you? And we want to promote an action. At Adeption, we love the idea of like being better and going out and experimenting and trying things. So what is something that you want to share, in the chat, an action that you're considering around some of what we've been talking today around AI and leadership development, especially since so many people were excited from the poll earlier that like they want to use this in their life and their programs and how they deal with it.
Just as that's as you're doing that too, just that some of the, I'd love to, we can come back and address some, there's some super interesting questions. So I'm happy to, as a follow-up, we can have a small sort of reconnect around some of them. There's a few there about the ChatGPT in particular and its limitation. It's just one narrow class of AI. So and it's purely text-based. So, there's some wonderful applications where insurance companies are running algorithms across call centers invisibly and using it to detect early stages of post-traumatic stress syndrome with return service people from war zones, for example, and then using that information to proactively send nurses and therapists to see those people that are showing very, very, worrying signs. These are so that's very, it's not text-based, it's very in the tonality of the voice and the context that's there. There's a lot of work being done on facial recognition too, and how we mirror our emotions through that. So it's both exciting and, I think just the current class of ChatGPT and OpenAI is just one little piece of it. If you can imagine, that's not AI, that's just one example.
That's great. I love Sharon's insight too about proceeding with curiosity, hope, and possibility more than concern.
Carl, there are a couple threads going on about the human connection that coaches and leadership development professionals provide, and can AI replace that? And so, love your take on that piece.
Certainly for the next quite a while. My take is that combination. There's not enough coaches and leadership development people to support all of the people that are doing work that really deserves that support. And I also mentioned I see there about the exploitation of coaches and driving the value of coaching down. I sort of see that the technologies can do exactly the opposite if we talk about it in the way that I am, because we have the vast, all of the heavy lifting being done by the technology, and then the coaches are actually higher skilled. We're not commoditizing coaching. We're actually turning it into a very, very expert craft that is targeted on those that actually most need it. Early in my career, I worked in a refrigeration factory as an engineer designing improvements, and 14 different fridges went down the line. And when there was a problem with one, it got pulled off and deep experts came and worked on that particular problem. And everything else was automated and flowed through. And I kind of think that's another metaphor that we can think about with coaching and leadership development. The people element is really, really important when it is needed. But people naturally grow and develop and learn anyway. Like, it's what we do. It's what we're really, really good at. And often as coaches and leadership development people, we actually get in the way. And so, let the technology do the heavy lifting. Some people you can't help but help. They'll be great. They'll be off to the races, and then save your input and your time for those that really need it. And then we've got the best of both worlds.
Love that answer, Carl. Thank you. And thank you. We're at the last 5 minutes. And so I want to thank Renee and Carl, Roland, everybody in the chat coming in, adding these amazing questions. I feel like, like Carl said, we will download these questions and sort of have a think and get back to everyone. I feel like that'd be worthwhile to do that. There's two things sort of clean up at the end here. If you, because of you're in the chat right now, if you would like to take one of our free VMI, it has AI scoring as a thank you, our vertical mindset indicator assessment. Just, you could put your name and email in the chat, and we would love to send you that to be able to do. It has a debrief and everything. And then I do want to have, Roland was also saying that there's a survey that we would love you to take, just to make these global chats even better and cooler and more relevant to you all. So if you can fill that out, that would be incredibly helpful. And then, Carl, I know that there is an incubator coming up soon, and I wanted to give you a moment to just talk about how cool that is.
No, great. I mean, and I didn't even talk about it. The VMI that you just mentioned, vertical mindset indicator, it's a great example of using this technology to make what was very exclusive and only available for the sort of upper echelon of executives in an organization to something that is nearly available to all. So It's an assessment or an indicator that looks at the mindset that you bring to the world. It's based on lots and lots and lots of research. And previously, it's human scored, and it's extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily expensive. And but it just so happens that it's a good candidate for AI scoring. And by scoring it with AI, we've been able to bring the price and accessibility down to the point where we can offer it to you all for free. And that's cool as far as I'm concerned, because it's really fascinating stuff, and it really helps people show up and evolve as humans. And so the incubator is an opportunity where we get leadership development professionals together, and instead of teach or certify in how to do this adult development as the center of your leadership development, or we call it vertical development, we incubate the process. And so you come together, learn about, just like Renee asked about colliding perspectives, that's one of the principles, one of the underlying principles of vertical or adult development. We get people together who are solving problems for groups of leaders, and they design together. It's like a startup incubator. They work on their project together, share ideas, and we facilitate the process. And in the process, you end up with, your prototype for how you're going to develop your leadership population, either a large scale one or not. A lot of people experiment with various platforms and AI and VMI. And it's a crazy experience, because we've got a cohort running right now in London with 25 people. So you can imagine 25 different, really interesting, fascinating people like yourselves working on a common problem in different organizations and contexts, and being able to share what you're learning and what you're seeing in a well-structured environment. It's asynchronous, synchronous, virtual, and in person. So we've got them coming up in San Francisco, which is hosted at Dropbox, and then another one in APAC, which will be in Auckland. So yeah, couldn't give it enough of a call out.
Yeah,
Yes, and
those are. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, just I have talked to multiple people that have gone to them, and wow, they always come out super excited and just a ton of new mindsets and information about it. So yeah. It's great.
And Roland dropped a link for anybody that wants to learn more about that experience and register for one of the few spots remaining. You can grab the link that Roland just put into the chat and check it out. So we have like 1.5 minutes left. So one more rapid fire question for you, Carl, to wrap up our time together. What advice, quote, or motto would you put on a billboard?
I think it would be, I'm just trying to remember the right order. Find love, write your own script. So there's something really, really powerful in finding love, whether it's love for a person, for what you do, for your family. I think it drives us as humans. And then write your own script is kind of what we're talking about. I might be the head of your plow, that, be in charge of your own life. And because we're subject to all sorts of things around us. So.
That's incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the audience for your engagement and participation, and really incredible chat dialogue. This is going to be a chat to download for the ages. And we'll see you at Global Chats hopefully next month.
You're all amazing. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks
Thanks all.
everyone.